Welcome to Name 3 Songs. I'm Sarah Fagan.
I'm Jenna Millian, and this is the podcast where we challenge sexism in the music industry and empower fangirls. Because let's be honest, fangirls knew about that band way before you did.
And if you stick around long enough, we'll also let you in on some new music the girls are already crazy about. And this is just your friendly reminder that you can be a bigger part of our community by joining us at Patreon. We have bonus episodes, a Discord server, and so many other cool goodies. So you should come and join us there at patreon.com/name3songs. Or if you just want to donate to the cause, you can do so at paypal.me/name3songs. But we also just appreciate your love, so no pressure.
So last week we had a big, massive Taylor episode, and this week we are following it up with a big, massive Taylor episode part 2 with some amazing fans.
Yeah, we had a really incredible discussion with 3 great fans, Soph, Joss, and Lizzy, and they really enlightened us on what it was like living as a Taylor Swift fan for over a decade. So
living through all the eras. Because it's easy for us to talk about it in retrospect and be like, oh yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened. They're on the ground floor, putting in the work, the blood, sweat, and tears of being a Taylor fan.
They've been through a lot. I feel like Taylor should maybe pay for some therapy bills.
Free therapy for every Taylor fan.
It's okay, Taylor, just call up Talkspace and get them some deal.
Yeah, for real.
But yeah, so we have a really in-depth fan perspective conversation about Taylor, which I think was very eye-opening, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear their thoughts and feelings, because I know a lot of you like Taylor and are Swifties and are somewhere in between that sort of realm. So I feel like for everyone who's not on the ground floor of being a Swiftie, this is going to be very enlightening, and I'm very excited for all of you to be enlightened like we were.
Yeah, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I would like to go around, have you introduce yourselves. Please say your name, where you're located, and how long you've been a fan of Taylor.
So I'm Soph, and I'm in Nottingham in England. I've been a Taylor Swift fan for about 13 years now.
I'm Joss. I live in Spain. I've been a Swiftie for around 10 years.
My name's Lizzy. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I've been a Taylor Swift fan also for probably about 13 years since I was 15 years old.
Incredible. It's so amazing just because she's had such a long career. Being there the whole way is always such a cool experience, especially as a fan. So has there been a point in her career that's really stood out to you that kind of made you proud to be a fan?
I honestly think this past year releasing Folklore and Evermore has made me so proud to be a fan of hers, because that's such an amazing achievement to be productive in lockdown. That's an achievement in itself, but to produce these 2 bodies of work that are just so incredible, tell such an amazing story. And I feel like she's finally broken through all the people who were like, oh, I don't like Taylor Swift, she just writes pop songs about boys. People are starting to take her seriously, and that's so nice to see as a fan.
Most definitely.
The recordings, it's for me it's a big fuck you to a bit to the business industry, It's okay, you know what, I don't need the money. Well, I don't need that money. I will say fuck you, I want to release everything again. I'm going to do this effort because I don't want you to get any money from my work, because you betray me. You were family and you betray me to this man that was attacking me all in my career all this time. You betray me for money. For me, it was oh my God, she means business.
It was very empowering. What about you, Lizzy?
I've always been the kind of person who if my friends are Taylor Swift, I'll be defending her, right? I straight jump into defense mode. But I think what's so cool is being a fan, like you said, from the beginning. The coolest part is that time and time again, there's never been a dip in her character. And I think the media might portray her as these dips in character, but if you look at the Christmas presents she'll send fans, or she'll pay their rent or student loans or things like that, the little things that unless you're looking at Taylor Swift and what she's done, you'll miss those things. And I don't think she cares that people miss those things, but it's those parts of her character, the way she wants to take care of future musicians and artists. The character, I think, is what impresses me the most, is that she's so willing to help other people, and I think that's probably the best reason why I'm a Taylor Swift fan from the start.
I love that so much, because that's what I've always been in awe of, is watching that happen. Because after I started really listening to her, I followed her on Tumblr because Tumblr apparently was taylorswift.com for like a while. And I was just like so blown away that she would reblog these like fan things and be like, I'm watching you. It's like, okay, how do you have the time?
Totally. I think that she like has taken the whole care about your fan base and not started it, because I think a lot of artists do that, but just like wanting to make these special moments at shows, after shows, right? Like the tea parties and things like that from the very beginning. Like she wanted to have a connection with her fans. And I think that's what made people want to be fans or go the extra mile to like make a bunch of Taylor Swift content. And I think that only helped her grow. That also like helped people actually love her and care about her and her growth.
Especially when you have an artist of her size, it's so insane. Because if you think of like smaller artists who like play smaller venues, you feel like you have a more intimate connection with them just because it is a smaller show. There's less people there. But when you're a fan of someone like Taylor and she's so huge, there's so many fans, you know, her shows are so big, it's like really special when she does those extra things to like know like she still cares and feel like she is someone that you can know and like feel like you're her friends, right?
I did see this morning, I can't remember if it's on TikTok or Twitter, but somebody was saying how like in the lyrics on Spotify for like one of the songs that this many letters were out of place. And so they're like, okay, this is in 70 days or like 77 days, she's going to be releasing. I can't remember what song it was, but this whole thing. And I'm like, because I have never, like, I don't think I've ever cared that much about anyone to like pay that close attention to like the Easter eggs and all of that stuff. But like, just because I'm curious, number one, as fans, like, when did you realize she was doing this? Like, leaving these Easter eggs? Like, is there an era where this started? And also, like, do you guys pay attention to this? Is this something you care deeply about, or are you just like waiting for somebody else to decipher them?
I think when I first started listening to her, like I didn't really take notice of any of that. It's only been since I've been on the internet and followed other Taylor Swift fans and stuff that I see it, because people are really good at decoding stuff and putting it online. I love it, but it does make me have trust issues because I'm like, stop putting stuff in things. I don't know what's real. I don't know when I'm supposed to be prepared for this. And then she drops 2 albums out of nowhere anyway. It's a lot. It gives me a lot of trust issues.
Yeah, and I also think that there have been times where fans are like, this is what it means, and they're totally wrong. And she's like, that would have been awesome. That's not it. So it's like, I think it can work against the fans also. I don't personally like decode all the stuff, but I'll check back and see what it says, like when someone else has done that. I don't know where that started, but I think as soon as she realized like, wait, people will decode it, like she started doing it more because again, she like wants to have the extra thing for fans to do and be a part of.
I love it so much. I also saw a TikTok that was about the Look What You Made Me Do video, because I know that one because I was working in like entertainment news at that time. So I remember that we had multiple articles where I had to go take screen grabs of different portions of music videos because they were like, oh, there's like this many Taylors and this is what this means and this is what that means. And I was like, oh my God, this is so intense. But I saw a TikTok about that video last night that was like, I actually think that the second verse is about Scott and that's why X, Y, and Z is happening. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, even if this isn't what Taylor was meaning to do, the fact that you could have gotten this from this is really crazy and impressive that there's just like all of this going on. But speaking of like, since we have been talking about like different moments in Taylor's career, do you guys have like a first memory of the media taking interest in Taylor? And if so, like what is that?
When I started taking notice of it was when they started kind of putting stuff about how many guys she was dating, because a lot of them were like guys that I had crushes on as well. I was like, oh my God, Taylor Lautner, I love him, and all that kind of stuff. I kind of noticed how often there were pictures of her with a guy. And I think as I grew up, I kind of realized how damaging that was. At the time, I kind of didn't think about it too much. I was like, oh, she's so lucky she gets all the boys. And then I'm looking back like, that was really not cool. Like half the time she wasn't dating them. She was just hanging out like a normal, like teenage, early 20s girl does. So I think that's when I first started noticing the media kind of starting to create a narrative about her that isn't necessarily true.
Yeah, I remember seeing the teenage magazine with picture of her with, you know, like a white dress, a white nice dress. And then after Speak Now, before it, it started the, oh my gosh, she dates a lot. He's a picture with you, Jonas. He's a picture with this one. He's a picture now. And John Mayer, he talked about her, you know, like she was a cheap songwriter. And then the media started to change the image that they have constructed around her.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably the same thing. It's like she came up as this artist who was so young, right? 16 or something like that.
Mhm.
And a year later, it wasn't even about the music. It was about who she's dating. And not just in like a, oh my gosh, they're together. Because like when she was dating Harry Styles, like not that people didn't care about that, but that was like a bad thing. Like they're in the Miss Americana Netflix series documentary they put out, like one of the quotes of one of the reporters was like, she's going through guys like a train. And she was like, you know, 18 years old and had dated like what, 3 people at that time. And it's just crazy the double standard, like Soph was saying, like she wasn't dating all of these guys. Maybe she went on a date with some of them and it was pictured as she's a slut, she's this and that, when she was like an 18-year-old girl who was just starting to like guys and trying to date. And I think that that is the moment that the media started painting her as this person who she's not. And the rebuttal was, well, then it's the music's problem. Like, why is she writing all of these songs bashing these men? And it's like, no, she's just writing a love song or writing a breakup song. And it was painted as it's her problem for portraying men in such a horrible way, when we don't say those things about, you know, male artists.
In the episode that Jenna and I recorded talking about Taylor, I sort of realized that after that like Joe Jonas moment where she's like on Ellen and like talking about that relationship, and that sort of got blown so far out of proportion, you can sort of see her throughout the news cycle sort of becoming a bit more closed off about talking about these relationships in any way, where then it just goes into the songs. And so I feel like there's also that thing where the media is like, well, you talked about it. And it's like, yeah, she was like 18 dating somebody who was like famous before she was famous. Like, of course she's going to talk about it because she's just like not super media trained yet. She doesn't know how any of it works because you're not prepared really, because you're like, oh, okay, like I was like a teenager, when somebody asks you about your relationship or your breakup, you're like, oh my God, thank you so much for asking. And like the rest of the world was like, how dare you be happy that somebody asked you about this? And it's like, she's hurting. I don't know. And it's so frustrating because I feel like a lot of the world started paying attention to her after that whole Kanye VMAs thing. But like my first real memory of her doing any talk show circuit or anything was that Joe Jonas thing. And I was like, this is weird. Like, I think I sent Jenna this video, but there was that video where there was like a Joe Jonas doll and she was like, oh, like he even has a phone so he can call people to break up with them in 15 seconds. And I was like, oh my God.
I think she got used to not, so after all of that, and that was an obvious Joe Jonas breakup, she got used to not saying who the songs were about. And I think that that's maybe the start of like the decoding and the wanting to give hints to the fans who actually care about the music, but not confirming for the people who don't really care, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like that, her being like, I'm not going to talk publicly about my breakups, it was almost just like fuel for the media to be like, well, what are you hiding? Like, make it more of a witch hunt, except that, like you just said, for fans, it wasn't a big deal and fans knew what it was about. For the media, it was like a whole big deal.
I think one of the reasons that the media was so obsessed with who she is dating is because she was dating the hot guys. So, and a lot of girls that were in love with them, you know, like, oh my gosh, she's so dreamy. Why she is with her? She's so blonde, so perfect. So I'm a girl, you know, a girly girl, because she has always been a girly girl. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that people had that negative reaction about her, because she was dating the hot guys. And I would have done the same. I mean, if I was like that beautiful, of course I'm going to date all these men if they want to date me. I mean, of course.
Who can blame her?
It's just that thing where it's like the internalized misogyny of the whole world was so strong when they saw Taylor Swift. And it's just mind-blowing that somebody who was fitting such like a cookie cutter image of like what like a girl next door is supposed to be like, because she is just like dating the football player, as you like, you know, and it wasn't anything nefarious or like dark or anything like that. She wasn't writing these songs about like sleeping with them or anything like that. She was just writing songs that people can relate to in some way or another, but because it's about like Jake Gyllenhaal, it's like, how dare you? And it's just so funny because she wasn't allowed to be anything. And we've talked a lot about pop stars having to be horny and virginal at the same time. And Taylor was just like that girl next door. She didn't have any other motives or anything else. And the media was like, but we want you to be both horny and virginal. How dare you not be really either? And they just got so mad about it. And I think that she's just the perfect example of somebody just towing the line of existence and the media being like, you're too normal, but also not because you're pretty. So what's the deal here?
I think that was a good way to put it. She is very like Barbie-like.
I just feel like there was nothing like dangerous about her. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I want to point out that nobody paid attention to those guys that she dated after the breakup. Like they were dating too, you know, after and before the breakup. They had all their messy relationships, and nobody said anything about them. I mean, from all her exes, only one is married that had have a kid. The other ones are like singles. So why are they single? Eh? Why? You know.
Yeah. Sarah loves to point out that Calvin Harris was a crusty man before he dated Taylor and after he became famous.
True. Oh my gosh. So true. It's just like a DJ over here that no one cared about.
It's literally like, I'm just so confused how he went from like the grossest looking man to all of a sudden there's like this relatively attractive man dating Taylor Swift. And everyone's like, this is Calvin Harris. And I'm like, that's not Calvin Harris. Calvin Harris has never left his basement because he's playing D&D. Like...
Yes, that is the vibe completely. That is exactly what he looked like. It was wild. I remember when they started dating, I was like, that's not Calvin Harris. Like, I've seen Calvin Harris. It does not look like that.
That was the weirdest thing. Like, there was like a good month where I was like, this is a fake man. Like, he took like the whole marshmallow thing to another level. He's hired a hot man to pretend to be him in the real world.
Ooh.
Like, I don't know what's happening.
Conspiracy theory.
I love it. Let's start it.
So speaking of the media in general, what are your guys' thoughts on how the media has treated Taylor throughout her career?
When she started, she was, you know, the girl next door with the sundresses, with the curly hair, singing about boys. Yeah, it was cute. That image, then it reached a point that the media started to focus on the men that she was dating, and then she's a slut. She has a problem. She's because she can keep a man. Then it slowly has reached another point that it was fine, you know, when she started to date Calvin Harris and all that. So like the media was calmed down because she was in a stable relationship. And then the summer happened. That summer it was really, really messy. And then it was like, oh my gosh, she's such a slut, you know, because she was flirting with 3 guys or whatever. Poor guys that they got their heart broken by this evil woman. And I like to point out that there is always like an idea that she's like money hungry. It started around that time. It was a confrontation with the media, and the media didn't like it. And then with the release of Folklore and Evermore, it seems like the media is calmed down a bit and like her again. But for how long are they going to be on her side? Because they were the same people that were attacking her when the sexual trial was going on. They call her name, they attack her body, her lack of, you know, of her breasts or butt.
I think that the media portrayed her horribly until she realized it didn't matter. Like Joss was saying, like, I think that up until Reputation and when the whole Kanye West, Kim Kardashian thing happened with the phone call, I think up until that point, she was trying to be good and perfect and painted in a perfect light and don't talk about politics and be skinny and be what people want you to be. Then that happened and she realized that like I could do everything right and hashtag Taylor Swift is over party could be trending on Twitter. And I think at that moment, like right then she went into kind of a hiding and no one saw her for a year or 2 years or however long it was. And when she came out of that, obviously she was like, bad bitch Reputation era, let's go. But from that point on, I don't think she cared so much about how the media portrayed her. And then with Lover, I think it was like total shift, leave Reputation era, still don't really care what people think, right? She put out The Man, and everything that music video and song symbolizes is very much like, look, things would be different if a man was doing the exact same things as me. And I think when she realized that everything could change just because one person lies about you and judges your character, it wasn't on her shoulders to have to be perfect, because at the end of the day, people can take what you say and twist it however they want. And the media was horrible to her. And like Joss was saying, now the media is not as bad to her, but I think it's because she's doing things she wants to do, writing songs she wants to write. Who cares what people interpret her songs as? And it's very much now different because of how she let go of that hold of the media.
Yeah, it was a rough summer that summer, after the breakup with Calvin Harris. I remember they were mad because Taylor get a bunch of artists in her tour in the 1989 tour. Yeah, there were a lot of famous people that were on the stage, and the media started to, no, this is a problem. Why are these people there? And then it was all her friends, while she always around all these famous pretty people. Those are her friends. I don't have any problem with them. And she was partying in Las Vegas with Calvin Harris and her friends. It's normal. But then it was a problem with the media. Apparently, it was a problem. I don't know why.
I feel like the media, like with her, she could not do anything right. When she was hanging out with guys, it was like, why doesn't she have any girlfriends? Why doesn't she hang out with her friends? And then she's hanging out with her friends, like, why are all of your friends pretty? And then it's like, you don't talk about politics. And then she talks about politics, and they're like, well, why are you talking about politics now? It's like she can't win. So I'm really glad to see her kind of just say, I can't please you, so I'm just going to be me, and that's it. And I think that's great, because it gives like a great message to fans as well. And I think she said at a concert once, like, you shouldn't worry what other people think of you if they say that you can't do something. I think it's a really like positive message, but it sucks that she only kind of had to get to that point after going through such bad press for really like no reason. There are way worse musicians who do way worse things that don't get talked about at all.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think I can name an artist who has gone through more scrutiny than Taylor Swift. And maybe there's someone out there, but just like public scrutiny of Soph was saying, everything that she did couldn't be right. So I think she was the most scrutinized artist for a while.
Yeah, you guys have hit on some like really important points, and I think it's so wild how the media was like, how dare you just hang out with supermodels and like all these hot girls and stuff. And it's like, okay, media, stop bashing people when they gain any weight then, and maybe she'll have some friends that look like they eat more. Like, what do you want? Like, it's like, what do you expect when like you are out here bringing all these women down constantly, for them to be like, Taylor, how dare you not have any normal looking friends? It's like, there are no normal looking people left. Like, what do you expect? Number one. And number two, it feels like every decade, 15 years, there's like a new artist that is doing really well, doing something sort of outside the mold, but not really, like Madonna or Janet Jackson. And like, there are these artists who are really successful that sometimes the media successfully does sort of just bring them down to the point where they're like, can't take it anymore. And I feel like the fact that Taylor sort of has just been like, you know what, fuck this, is really interesting. Because like with Reputation, it very much was like a fuck you letter to the media, and the media was like, actually, it's not about us. It's like, oh, okay, what? And it's just really funny, because like we've talked about this a couple different times in like not as serious a way, but like it really was like the media being like, we don't accept this, so we're actually going to make you the problem. And it was like them deciphering all this imagery that was very clearly about them and making it about like, oh, look, this is Taylor saying that she's a snake. And it's like, no, Taylor is saying you're a snake. You're the snake.
Yeah.
Sarah, while you're working at like your job that like is the snake and like editing photos for them, and they're like,
it's like the most, I literally say this all the time, it's the most frustrating thing to work in the photo department of an entertainment news outlet / gossip news outlet, because you literally have no power like whatsoever.
So you guys all kind of mentioned the Reputation era, which is like she went quiet for a while, and like her documentary said like nobody saw her for a year, and then Reputation came right after that. Do you guys remember that era of being like, where is Taylor? What's going on? Why is she so quiet? Where is she? Like, were you guys concerned? Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember this like so clearly because 1989 was like so iconic for me. It was such a like great time in my life, and this it was like the soundtrack to just the best times. And then it, like you said, she just disappeared, like off all social media, everything. And it was such a weird, like, I hate when celebrities do that. I understand why they do it, but I'm like, do you not understand that as a fan, you posting on Instagram is so great? I know it means nothing to you, but it's nice to see for me. So it was such a weird one. And then when Reputation came out, I hate to say it, but I was one of those fans that was like, what's happening? This is not the Taylor that I know. And obviously she says in that song, like, the old Taylor can't come to the phone right now. And I'm like, no, I love the old Taylor. I love country singing Taylor and pop Taylor. What's going on? And like when Lover came out after that, I was like, oh, I get it now. It was like a whole thing. I understand why you did that now. But that whole time I was like, I'm confused. Is this how Taylor is going to be now? Like, I don't know if I like this. I really questioned myself for a long time. It was very stressful. Taylor is part of my personality. And I was like, what's happening?
You're like, do I need to go buy a leather corset?
Yeah, I can't pull that off.
Remember like listening to it, and I think she had to take the break and really just assess, like, for her, like, I don't think she did anything wrong, but I think there was so much hatred going her way that she needed to, like, she fell in love in that time and take that break to not be in paparazzi photos or be anyone's like scapegoat for a problem. And I remember I was on vacation and I was in the car, and all of a sudden I got a notification that Taylor Swift posted on Instagram, and I was like, oh my god, because she hadn't in like a year. And it was like the first of 3 videos of like that snake.
Yeah.
You guys probably remember this. And I was like, oh shit, we are in for something. And then when Look What You Made Me Do came out, I remember being like, this is different, but like this is what she hasn't done yet, so let's go. And I remember a couple of my friends texting me like, do you think she'll like never write like a nice pop love song again? And I was like, guys, it's a phase. She didn't like actually die. But it was like so different, and I think that was necessary for what she hadn't done, and it was something fresh and it was something different, and it was kind of like a big fuck you to the people who have clearly poured problems on her that she really wasn't the start of. So I loved it. I was a big fan.
Yeah, well, I was taking a break from Taylor and the fandom because I had reached a point that, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I can't read all the fans that are calling her a slut, or they're calling her that, or the fans that are always defending her, like, but in an annoying way. I need a break from that summer. And because I love 1989, but for me, it was an album that Taylor did for the critics because she didn't win Album of the Year with Red. So because it was not cohesive or something like that. So I like 1989, but I didn't love it like Red because I love Red. Red is my favorite album. And then then she started to delete her image from Instagram. And then it was the snake, and then it was the video, and then for me it was, oh, this is her experimental phase, it's a phase that she was going to make. I don't know what she's going to make next.
I feel like that's a really good way to break down like what was sort of happening in the Taylor sphere at that time, because I feel like as somebody who was like an outsider looking in, that felt very much like what was happening, that Taylor was reacting and trying to not act like she was reacting, because I feel like she is a very strong person, but she plans everything out. She's very meticulous in everything that she does, and I feel like she wanted her fans to know like that she is staying true to herself, but at the same time she's like, you guys are aware of this battle that they're making me fight, so I need to react. So I feel like it is really interesting to sort of think of it that way, of like 1989 being something where she's like, okay, this is me, but I also need to like do something so that they know that I'm being serious. And then Reputation was like, okay, you guys fucked everything up, so here is me being angry. And then after that, when people started to realize that like, oh, Taylor Swift has thoughts and feelings, because I feel like for so long, as I said earlier, like there was that just cookie cutter, like girl next door sort of image, and people didn't really want to acknowledge that Taylor Swift was a human. And I feel like the anger and reputation was so acknowledged, even if they didn't want to be like, yes, this is about me. They like knew it was. And so I feel like that gave her the chance to do something like Lover and then move on from that whole thing of being like a response to what was happening in the world. I don't know if that makes sense for you guys, but like for me, as somebody who has no idea what's happening, that's what it felt like.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what it felt like for me, kind of more in hindsight than at the time. I think at the time I was more like, I'm confused. But now I get it, and I appreciate Reputation so much more now than I did when it was released. I think there was such a kind of divide in Swifties that was like either, yes, I'm absolutely here for it, or like, what's going on? I'm confused. So I think it now makes so much sense, like in Taylor Swift history, and it's like such an iconic moment. But yeah, I think it needed to be put out there. I think she needed to be like, I have thoughts, I have feelings, I'm a person, and you are actually like upsetting me by doing this. So I think it made sense.
Jenna, did you have thoughts about that?
It's interesting that she did that because, Sarah, we've talked about different artists who like either like do something to like, I don't really want to use the word retaliate, but almost like speak up for themselves or like stand up for themselves. Like that's what she was kind of doing. She was like putting her foot down, being like, this is not okay. You can't treat me like this, stuff like that. That's basically what she was doing with that album. But I think it's interesting that she did that because she's literally so famous that like she didn't have to do that. Like she could still keep doing whatever she wants to do and still selling records and her fans would still love her. But I just think it's interesting that like she made the point to have dedicate a whole era to that.
I think also that she's sort of proven that a lot of what she's done is so that other people don't have to go through what she's gone through. That she's sort of being like, okay, there was no playbook for me, so I'm going to write a playbook for other people. And I listened to like a Zane Lowe interview that she did, and she was saying how she has younger artists that like will reach out to her, and she's always like available to be like, okay, this is how I can help you so that you don't have to go through the same things that I went through. And I just feel like the fact that she literally is just like available as a mentor and doing these things where it's completely right. She didn't have to do any of it, but I feel like she was like, nobody else has done this. So maybe if I do it, people won't have to go through as harsh of a world as I went through.
I mean, I feel like that's kind of the same thing with her re-recording her old work is like essentially that same idea.
Yeah, I love that. From the start of that whole thing playing out, it was like, if she does this, no one's ever done that before. No one's ever like cared that much. And like, I know people who have had successful songs who in that moment were kind of like, yeah, that sucks that like she wasn't even offered them, but like it's kind of crazy, no one owns their own music. And the whole concept of that is like, yeah, isn't that what's so fucked up? That like you can afford it, because I know that if you have a hit song, oftentimes it is like sold every 5-10 years or whatever, and you don't own it a lot of the times. But for her to not be given the option to own it, right? It wasn't even a conversation. It was like, no, let's have some man own it instead of you. She has the money to do it. And I think that that was what was so frustrating, and probably a big reason why she wanted to leave Big Machine anyway. And so it is just kind of so iconic that other people will probably do that, or have at least the knowledge to want to own their own music and know that that's a possibility going forward, making record deals. You know, when she signed, I'm sure it wasn't on the table. Like, she probably didn't think she would ever leave or need to leave, but at the same time, probably no one really owned their own music at that stage in 2010 or whenever, you know, she signed. So
yeah, it was a long time ago, and like the streaming industry has changed a lot in the past 10 years. So it's like there's no way she could have known.
Right.
Yeah, and it was, you know, it was a man that she trusted. I mean, it wasn't an executive from a big company. No, it was the man that she worked for a long time to build the company, and he sold her work to Scooter Brown, a man that was attacking her. It's that betrayal, and it was sad because he considered Scott Borchetta her family for a long time.
So speaking of Taylor sort of gaining her voice and sort of putting her foot down and standing up for herself and all these other things over the past few years, and also being more open about her viewpoints on hot topics like politics and that sort of thing. As fans of hers, like, what are your guys' personal feelings about the timing of her being outspoken? And do you feel like the critique on that is warranted, or do you think that it's just another reason that people have to feel the need to attack her?
I think that her putting out the documentary that she did on Netflix really helped me to kind of understand why she spoke out when she spoke out. And there's a scene in that where it's like her dad and like two other guys saying to her, like, no, don't make any statement, just be quiet. And she's like, why? Trump's the president. I should have spoken out sooner and I didn't. I can't change that. I want to make a difference now. And I think it was so nice as a fan to see her be able to do that. And I kind of understand why she didn't sooner. Obviously that whole thing happened with the Dixie Chicks and they were like boycotted from like all radios, and as someone starting out as like a country artist, you probably are so aware of that story and you just want to not make any waves if you don't have to, especially when you're Taylor Swift and anything you do gets criticized anyway. It must have been a really scary place to be in and feel like you couldn't really speak out. And I think it's so good that she started to do it now. And some might say like, oh, why is it now? It's like too little too late. But I think she has done so much, especially kind of over the past year. She's really done like above and beyond what a lot of other celebrities were doing to encourage people to vote, to make sure that people were educated on things. So as a fan, I think it's great to see and it's really inspiring, and it made me look into politics over here more. I was like, yeah, I want to use my voice. I want to learn more. I want to do stuff. I don't need to be quiet. I should be talking about stuff, especially with our prime minister.
Well, when you're a fan of Taylor, you kind of know her political beliefs. But if you're a fan, for example, you have this interview where she talks about voting for Obama, this interview about discrimination, about not discriminate to people. So you more or less know her her political beliefs, but the media didn't, and they didn't care, and they demanded her to be like a politician, like the poster face of activism. I mean, she doesn't have to be. We, the people, have to be educated and have to go and have to find this information. And we don't have to rely in celebrities or pop stars to tell us who is the person that we need to vote. I mean, that's important. But it was like this demand on her to be this super political activist figure that it doesn't make any sense because she doesn't have to be. But yeah, it was nice to know, for her to do that documentary, because it gave us like, look guys, she's not a white supremacist. Like we were talking, we were saying you all this time, she wasn't. She voted for Obama, she voted for Hillary, like, and it's in the media, it's in front page. She is not a white supremacist. But in the fandom, like, there is like a sentiment of a bit of sadness, because there has been a lot of occasion that she was called the white supremacist princess and she didn't say anything about it, and that hurts. If you're a person of color, it hurts that they are calling her that. Sometimes we feel a bit frustrated, because in what way I want her to be like, hey guys, this is wrong, please don't talk about me that way, respect the fans of colors that are in the fandom. But on the other hand, she doesn't have to do that, she doesn't have to do that, because she's a normal person and you can choose if you want to be a public figure about this topic or not.
Part of the Netflix documentary where it was like her and her publicist and her mom on the couch. I think it was the part right after what Soph was saying, but she was like about to hit post on Twitter or Instagram of like that first post where she really stated her political views and just like the whole, I think it was the Senate race in Tennessee. Yeah. And she was so nervous and like they cheersed with wine and she was freaking out. And I think that was so humbling to see, like someone at her position, like to take a stance. There's no right time. There's no time that she could have, because in the first political election, she was very much in that hiding reputation area. So I don't blame her for not poking her head out at that time. But in hindsight, you could probably say, sure, she should have. But is that what she was going to poke her head out for? I don't know. So she knew she was wrong, and there is no right time. There's no changing what happened. But in that moment, you could see like how nervous she was to be posting that social media post. And I think that her voice does matter. And regardless of who wins, knowing that she spoke up is important for her. And I think everything that she did for the LGBTQ plus community with the whole "You Need to Calm Down" music video, she got scrutiny for that. Like, she was donating all the proceeds, right, to different campaigns, and she had like the Equality Act link in that description, all of that stuff. And people were like, well, she's doing the wrong thing. Like, there should not have been, people had a problem with it. And I thought it was so iconic. I probably watched that video like 18 times. So there's no right way for celebrities to speak out on issues that matter. But I think the cool part of coming out of that Reputation era is that she did speak out for those things that really do make a difference, just for people feeling included and like they belong in a community where maybe they didn't know that if they belonged because she didn't say anything about it before. So I don't think there's a right time, but I'm glad she did speak up and just have people of different races and sexual orientations like represented in her videos and her things. So it's cool.
I see where Joss is coming from with the whole thing where people were referring to her as like this white supremacist princess, because I mean, there is like the preconceived notion for people outside of that bubble, like as I keep saying, like a complete outsider to it all, of the assumption of like, okay, she's white and blonde and blue-eyed and involved in country music and all those things. And so for me, I just was like, she's not talking about politics because she's a Republican and this is a problem. But because I feel like when Obama was president and stuff, like, and I've talked to like with my family about this a lot, like there was still that American ideal of like promise and hope sort of thing. And then towards the end of his presidency, there were started to be a lot more hate crimes and all of these issues. And then of course, like Donald Trump coming up and everything. And so I feel like up until that point, you're kind of like, okay, people don't need to be that loud about politics because things seem to be going in like the positive direction that they tell you the future is supposed to go in. And then with the whole Trump thing and all this hatred coming up, and there's these artists who do have such like young, impressionable followers, it's like, yeah, it's not their job to be advocate and like to be political activists and all that thing. But at the same time, it's like when you have rumors about you and you know that you have these rumors about you, it's just as easy to like say something. So I'm glad that she eventually did and was very open about like why she wasn't, because it's like there is that group of men like sitting there being like, are you sure you want to do this? Because everybody right now thinks of you as that girl that lives next door, and if you do this, you're not anymore for a lot of people.
And I think the crazy part is like, I don't think a lot of people were thinking of her as the girl next door at that time. I think she's so new that she just needed to, and I think it was for the Senate race, if I'm not mistaken, but like just go out and say like, hey, this lady's not supporting what I just went through with the sexual assault trial. And I think that that was very much a focus of hers, of why she wanted to speak out. And at that point, those men in the room, they weren't saying like, I don't think you should do this. They were like, don't do this. And I think she just knew she needed to stand up for those people who could be taken advantage of in the future. Going back to my point of like, I think everything that she does is because she wants that not to happen to someone else. And I think that that's a character trait that has carried her through a lot of the positive parts of her career.
Also, just hearing you say that again, the thing with the trial and then the Reputation era and then the elections, just like a culmination of all of it, I think really led to her personally realizing like, no, actually, I do care about this. I do want to stand up for this. I want my fans to know where I stand. I think there was like a lot of factors, and especially like the sexual assault case, that were really kind of her realizing in herself. Because to Sarah's point, prior to like 2014, we didn't always expect our pop stars to be political, especially in the early 2000s. Things were very separate. And so I think as we evolved and as we realized, hey, no, like we do want to know where you stand on these things, she was, you know, I think some people would say she was late to the game. But again, it's like a personal thing where like we can't pressure her to do something she's not comfortable with. And I just, again, the scene with the men on the couch and them being like, don't do this. It's like, that's what she's been told her whole career, right? She was just following what other people have told her of what the model is for being a pop star. And so once again, it's like something that she has to reconcile within herself and with her team of being like, no, I want to do the right thing.
Well, also, I feel like we were all raised with parents who were like, these are the 3 things not to talk about on a date or at dinner, which are
Yeah.
like politics, money, and like, I don't know the third one, but you know, like it was just always like, don't talk about politics.
Yeah.
And it didn't really become a thing that people were that open about talking about until Obama. And then after that, it sort of became an even bigger thing because you sort of see what's happening in the whole world, but specifically America, like going off into like these 2 factions, really. So you can't really, thinking about it with that perspective, like blame her for not saying anything because she's from Tennessee, like, and like a Democratic family in Tennessee, like you don't want to talk about that too loud in public because you don't know how people are going to react.
Yeah, there's just so many factors that play into it.
So we have like one final question that I'm really interested in getting your guys' perspective on as fans, which is the public's like interest and the way that people liked Taylor, I feel like has really been changing sort of since 1989 Reputation era. Like I feel like people are starting to realize what she's doing with her music. But really when Folklore dropped, people and the media sort of changed their tune about their viewpoints on Taylor because she was making like quote unquote serious music all of a sudden, which really just means like music that maybe men listen to. So what are your guys' opinions on the sudden change of the narrative around Taylor's music and also just like the reception of Folklore and then Evermore?
I find it really frustrating that people only have just started to take her seriously now, because I think, like you said before, it was always like, oh, Taylor Swift is like songs that girls like, and if girls like something, then it's not cool. And it was just so frustrating. Like I didn't used to tell people that I like Taylor Swift because I couldn't be bothered to get into the argument of like, oh, she only dates boys, all these boys, and she writes all these songs. Like I just couldn't be bothered to like spend my time defending her and defending my music interests. But now it's so nice to see her get the kind of recognition and respect that she should have got way before. She's been writing amazing songs for so many years. So whilst as a fan it's like really frustrating, in some ways it's nice. And I think a lot of people that I know who've kind of listened to Folklore and Evermore are now listening to her back catalogue and going, oh, she's had bops all along. I really like these songs. I just didn't listen because of my internalized misogyny or because I thought she was uncool. So it's nice for people to finally get on my level, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating to know, like now to see, oh my gosh, she's such a good songwriter. I mean, no, she has always been a good songwriter. When she was 14, when she was 15, 18, it doesn't matter. She was writing all her songs because there were people that were, oh my gosh, she doesn't really write her song. They go, no, she does. And for me, with these 2 albums, it seems like she doesn't care about the critics, but because she's doing what she likes. She's writing all these songs, she's producing them, and being herself. I mean, I was waiting for this kind of album for a long time. After Reputation and Lover, I was waiting for, like a more calm album that focused only in lyrics, not much about the music of it was catchy, because I know that he's really talented. And yeah, I was waiting for these kind of albums.
Yeah, I would say that I think it's crazy that obviously she released 2 albums, 3 if you count Fearless in the past year. But with Folklore, I think her saying that she almost didn't release it because she didn't think it was good, like had it not been quarantine, she probably wouldn't have released these songs because they're not what people are used to. I think that's so telling because she won Album of the Year for something that she thought might not be what people want. And I think that just goes back to everything that we've talked about of like, as soon as you can release release yourself from trying to please other people, that's when you're the most genuine, the most you. And I don't think she really cared. Like, she was writing songs about people she's never met, or about her grandma, or co-writing them with her boyfriend, and writing from a storyteller's perspective, all things that her fans weren't used to, probably the people she worked with wasn't used to. It's always been about, who are you writing this song about? What part of your life is this relating to? And she dropped all that and just wrote songs, and a lot of them, and then put them out, and it won Album of the Year. And so as a fan, it's impressive and it's inspiring to just like, it doesn't have to be what you think is your ticket to the next big successful thing. It just has to be like genuinely you. And when she did that, it was so telling. And now she has more of a fan base of people she didn't used to have. And isn't that what music's all about? Is like, sometimes it brings in more people depending what you're writing about. So I love Folklore era because of that. And I wouldn't say it's like my favorite album or the album with the most hits or bops, but it's so special because it's a time and place where she took away all of the pressure and just wrote the songs. And then she got what she really wanted, which was to win Album of the Year. So it was really telling, and I loved that story for her, that you can do things when you think it's not what other people want. It could be like your most successful thing yet.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, number one, it just goes to show like how strong her songwriting is. And number two, I'm curious to see if like now that she just put out Fearless, Taylor's version, I'm curious to see if like those people who were like, oh my God, Evermore is amazing, like if they are gonna listen to this and be like, wow, she made some points on this record 10 years ago that we blew off because we thought she was a dumb girl. Like, I just wonder what people's reactions are going to be.
Well, the thing, so I mentioned that Zane Lowe interview before, but she had said that she felt like she was reaching this point in her life where maybe writing from personal like wasn't the best option for her anymore, and that she was afraid of like what people's reaction was going to be of her writing like fictional music. But I think the thing that is really interesting, having listened to both Folklore and Evermore and then going back and listening to Fearless, which she wrote in like a completely different mindset, it's the same storytelling tropes. Like, it's the same things, except for we know that the songs on Fearless are about Taylor, and we know that the songs on Folklore and Evermore aren't so much about her. But I mean, of course, like, even if you're writing fiction, it's still coming from you. So it's still based off of things that you already know and understand and have lived through in some sort of way, no matter how fiction the fiction is, you know? And so I agree with Jenna. I feel like it is going to be very interesting going forward as Taylor continues to release like Taylor versions of these songs, to like see how the world reacts based off of knowing that this is just like her style, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I can speak from personal experience. Like, my boyfriend's always known I like Taylor Swift, but I think because we've been locked down, he's seen me go through like 3 albums. He's like, wow, you're really emotionally invested in these. Explain this to me. And so I've made him watch Miss Americana. I've showed him a bunch of music videos. I played him Fearless, Taylor's version. And he's like, she has amazing songs. She's a great songwriter. I can't believe I haven't listened to her before. Like, and I keep trying to say it's because the media told you that she wasn't cool. But I don't want to get in an argument with you. So yeah, okay, you're just discovering it. It's fine. And I've seen like a couple of people online as well be like, oh, these are great. So I hope it continues that way. I hope people continue to kind of give her the respect that she deserves as a songwriter.
I think that she has reached a level now with success and all the awards that she can do whatever and it will be a success because she has a strong fan base that buys her albums, and right now that's really important because not many people are buying physical albums.
Yeah, and I think at this stage in her career, she's kind of done all genres. Like, I know that there was a point where she was only country, and it was like a big deal for her to enter the pop world. And there was a crossover album, and then there was a full pop album, and then there was another full pop album. And so at this point, it's like she's done country, done pop, done folk, right? That acoustic thing. So it's very open to the next step is like whatever she wants to be. I think she's proven herself as an artist, as a songwriter in all of these lanes, that now that she doesn't care so much about the media or what other people think. It is very much a relationship with her and her fans, and she could go on to do any album next because she's done it all successfully. So
So true. I think that's like a perfect point to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. This was such a fun, interesting conversation, especially for Sarah and I being kind of like outsiders. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Thank you.
Let's just like go around, and if you want to give like your social handles, if people want to follow up, find you, chat more, whatnot, we'll go around and say like where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Soph Jones Music, and I also have a podcast called Download Your Thoughts.
You can find me in Tumblr. I use Tumblr. Just Brago.
And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Lizzy Zybert is my name, and then I'm also in a pop duo called Fairview, and you can find us there at Fairview Official.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, I know I say this every time, but that was incredible.
I learned so much.
Like literally,
I truly learned so much.
like genuinely. And it's funny because I know I was talking a lot about my gossip news history, but truly like there were things that like I was vaguely aware of, and they just like made it 100% clear that like guess what actually was happening. And I'm like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting as people who are literally just complete outsiders to something, because I feel like with Lana Del Rey, like we said, we were outsiders, but we really like we knew what was happening because of the way it was spoken about. But with Taylor, like there's so many different narratives happening that unless you are like good friends with a Swiftie, you don't really know what the hell is going on because they're the only ones that know.
Yeah. And a lot of, I mean, I feel the same way about Taylor's career as most of the other people we've talked about. It's like, I like was more invested in the beginning, and then I kind of like grew apart in my separate way.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of this stuff I know like via the media. So it's like I'm not like an insider, but I do have like a more direct connection. But yeah, I mean, and that's why I love having like multiple people on too, is just because like they can compare notes with each other, like even talking about their experiences about like Reputation and stuff.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it was like they went through so much with that Reputation era as fans.
I'm like, are y'all okay? I need to check up on y'all.
Like Taylor Swift needs to pay all reparations.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Like that's just a lot to go through, because it was just funny because Joss kept being like, oh, that's Summer, and I'm like, what Summer?
Yeah, I'm like, what happened?
And I was like, oh, okay, it's the summer with like Tom Hiddleston and like all that other nonsense that was going on. But like it just all is like lumped together in my brain of all these different like talking points that we covered at my old job, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, no, that was so funny. Well, if you made it this far into the episode, I hope you're well satisfied that we finally covered Taylor Swift in 2 episodes. Come share your thoughts with us.
So if you do want to continue the Taylor discourse, you can find us on social media at Name3Songs, or personally at Sarah_Fagan and at Jenna_Million. I feel like there's not a lot of beef to be had. But again, if we for some reason made a completely wild and crazy Taylor Swift opinion, please let us know. We have no problem discussing that with you. And if you want to be a bigger part of our community, you can do that at patreon.com/name3songs, or you can donate to the cause at paypal.me/name3songs. So thank you for joining us on Name 3 Songs. Until next time, never let anyone make you feel bad about your favorite band.
And remember, you're never too cool to listen to Taylor Swift.
And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when each episode comes out. And leave us a 5-star review. They really help.
If you want to find out more about any of the sources we referenced in this episode, you can visit name3songs.com.